Homework video number 7 for tonight is about bureaucratic oversight. This is one of the most important series of notes that you can take, especially for your Environmental Protection Agency paper, but also for the exam. This is really where checks and balances come into play. Oversight is all about watching what each branch is up to make sure that all three branches are following the Constitution. In this case, we're going to see how the executive, legislative, and judicial branches can make sure that the executive branch and the bureaucracy in particular are doing what they have to do in accordance with the law and the Constitution. All right. The executive branch has direct control over the bureaucracy. The first thing the president can do in order to oversee what the bureaucracy is doing is to appoint top officials. This, of course, allows the president to pick people that he can trust and who align with his perspective and point of view. They are then in charge of being the boss. And of course, the boss's job is to make sure that everyone else is doing their job correctly. So if the president trusts the people that he appoints, these top officials, he can watch over them. They in turn can watch over everyone else and make sure that the 4.5 million people that work for the president, who will be Democrats and Republicans, are doing the job that the president wants and doing it well. And if they're not, then they need to go. The president can also issue executive orders. For example, President Obama has issued an executive order for the Environmental Protection Agency to write regulations on carbon emissions. This is an exact contradiction to Congress, who refused to write a law explicitly about carbon emissions. He says that he can use the Clean Air Act to do this. Another example is that President Obama issued an executive order to stop enforcing the law "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" in the military. He believed that because he is commander-in-chief, he could tell his generals, "Do not fire anyone else," simply because they are gay in the military. Again, this is ignoring a congressional law. He's using his executive authority. Presidents have to be careful issuing executive orders because these can be pretty easily challenged in court. And he has to make sure that he's not overstepping his role and taking over legislative powers, writing laws. So while the president can do this, and Obama has promised to do this in the future because of what Republicans have done in not writing any laws he asked for, you still have to be very careful, making sure that you are in fact following the Constitution and not overstepping your bounds, and knowing that you probably will end up in court, and you better win, otherwise they'll be reversed. Other things the president can do are changes. The president is allowed to reorganize within existing departments. For example, if there are 20 offices in the Department of State and he wants to bring it down to 10, combining offices together to change priorities, that's something he can do as long as the laws are being faithfully executed. So he can't just say, well, I don't really like the Department of State, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Only Congress can do that via law. But he can try to change the priorities of the Department of State by emphasizing certain jobs over others. That's what bosses are allowed to do. Furthermore, he can change budget proposals that he submits to Congress. If he doesn't like a certain department or think it's very important, he could propose to Congress that he actually wants to cut their budget. And Congress is usually amenable to cutting budgets. That being said, this is just a proposal. In the end, Congress decides how much money each department gets because they are in charge of money. So this is the executive branch directly controlling the bureaucracy. Remember, the bureaucracy is a part of the executive branch. Next, we have the legislative branch. They have three major ways that they can control the bureaucracy and oversee what they're doing and make sure they're doing the right things. The first two go together, laws and money. What the legislative branch can do first is alter any agency's function. All they have to do is change the existing law, and that's it. They have to follow the law. So that's an easy way of overseeing. Another thing they could do is just simply get rid of or abolish existing programs. Again, bureaucratic agencies don't have to be there. They are not required in the Constitution. Therefore, if Congress wants to destroy or get rid of the law that established the Environmental Protection Agency, something Republicans would love to do, they can do that. Of course, they need to have enough votes, and they need to get the president's signature. And if they can't get the president's signature, then they need to have a 2/3 majority to override the president. But it can be done. It just hasn't been done. Next, they could limit discretion. Remember, discretion is the opportunity for the bureaucracy to make choices in how they implement the law. But if the law is so detailed that there is no room for choice, then the bureaucracy has to follow the law. So, if they really want to spend a lot of time writing thousands of pages of laws and really specific regulations in their law, they can do that. It's just that that takes so much time and effort that they don't have, and they're so busy that usually they won't do this. But if they're angry at an agency, they will, because they want control. If they think the agency is violating their orders or their ideas, then they will limit their discretion. Last but not least, the legislative branch can punish agencies by reducing their budget. That'll, of course, cut jobs and make it very difficult for them to do their work. This is a huge power, which means bureaucratic agencies have to be very careful in how they treat Congress's laws. If they try to get too choosy and they violate and they don't faithfully execute the laws, then Congress can get their revenge by cutting their budget. Next, Congress can also hold hearings. This is where they officially investigate bureaucratic activity. They can call in any member of the bureaucracy at any time and question them under oath. And the bureaucratic agencies have to show up. They can also request reports, and they do. They might want receipts, they might want detailed evidence that everything is working and going according to plan. They can ask for anything they want, and they need to receive it. Again, they hold all the money, they wrote the laws. Last but not least, the Senate can confirm agency heads and important positions. Remember, this is Senate only, so while the president can nominate people to lead his departments, the Senate still has to confirm. The next branch, the last branch here, that has oversight powers over the bureaucracy is the judicial branch, and this is through trials. As we know, judicial branch has the power of judicial review. This means they can decide whether the actions of the bureaucracy are constitutional or unconstitutional. This can include whatever the bureaucracy does, any laws that they are enforcing, but this really is about the president and Congress, and any regulations that the agency writes. If Congress believes that the agency is writing regulations that do not faithfully execute the law and that go against the law, then they could take the agency to court and demand that the regulations be changed. And the court will decide, did the bureaucratic agency go too far and violate the law, or were they faithfully executing it? That's all a matter of interpretation. How this works: a person, a state, a corporation, or another branch of government can challenge an action in court. The courts then decide if the action violated the law and or the Constitution. If they did violate the law or the Constitution, then of course that action has to be changed or righted. If they didn't, then the bureaucratic agency can continue. One of the questions we have is this in fact enough? And this is going to be your closing question. Do we have enough oversight? Does it work? Let's start with the executive weaknesses. First, the executive branch is in control of the bureaucracy. Therefore, as long as they're lining up with the vision of the president, he probably won't question what they're doing very much, unless, of course, they're betraying him, and then he'll lay down the law. The legislative branch. Let's say that the Democrats control the legislative branch and the president's a Democrat. They may not question what the president is doing, even if he's violating the law, because they're on the same side and they don't want to seem like they're fighting against each other. That being said, this obviously changes when a Republican's in control of the House and a Democrat's in control of the presidency. Then the Republicans are calling lots of hearings because they want to make the president look bad, and this is a chance for them to take positions against the president. So you can bet the Health and Human Services Committee has gone crazy questioning Obamacare because Republicans still don't like it. Lastly, the judicial branch. The only way a case comes up is if it's brought to court, and this can take a long time and usually happens after an event or problem has taken place. This can go on for years before it could reach the Supreme Court and have a final decision. That means that the problem could continue for a while before it gets corrected, and/or a good law might get stopped and have to wait until they figure out it's a good law before it can continue. Lastly, there are consequences of too much oversight. Mainly, that if we question everything a bureaucratic agency does and make it be subject to politics, it's no longer governance, this is just politics. And the government would not be able to get much done, slowing down the process. As we know, writing and passing legislation takes a very long time. And so we need, once it's done, we hope that it's done and the law just goes into action and does what it's supposed to do without too much interference afterwards. And here's your closing question. Based on what you know so far, do you think there is enough oversight of the federal bureaucracy? Why or why not? Please be detailed in your explanation using evidence from what you have learned. It doesn't have to be super long, but you want to think free response length. All right, thanks guys.